Welcome to Lawyers Who Learn, where we explore how attorneys' engagement and lifelong learning fuels their growth. Join us to uncover these journeys and gain insights for your legal career.
Ed, I'm so excited to have you on Lawyers Who Learn. I've known you in different ways for 15 years, but I don't think we've actually had a full in-depth conversation ever. Usually I see you in passing at a conference and I'm like, I say hi, you say hi, and I'm like, I don't know if he likes me.
Is that right?
Yeah, not really, but I'm like, oh, I would love to talk to him more, but you're always so busy at a conference and there's 10 people you're talking to. And I wish I took advantage of this earlier in my career to learn from all that you've done.
Thank you. As you say, I feel like longtime listener, first time caller. I've been a fan of yours and of Lawline's for the longest time. Use it for my personal CLE as a member of the Virginia State Bar many times. I think you've got the best hair in legal tech. And I've really enjoyed following your journey as an entrepreneur, as a business leader, and your family story during the pandemic.
Yeah.
So I feel like even though we haven't had the opportunity to sit down one-on-one as often as we'd like, there's a very strong mutual admiration. At least I very much respect your stuff.
No, I appreciate that. And of course, there's always imposter syndrome because when I look at you and your background, and that's what we'll get into a little bit now, is you're just, I feel like I'm just touching the surface. I'm really good at speaking and promotion and ideas. You actually do the substantive work of teaching, writing, understanding, and it's so great. So let's get into it. And so let me just give you a sense of what this is and what this is not. This is really about you and how you learn in your career. And we'll take any path that it goes. It's a conversation, and hopefully others will learn and be inspired from it as well. And I'm just going to briefly take 2 minutes. I put about 7 different things that I can find of your bios, even though I knew it. I put it into Google LLM, and I had to create a timeline that was way too detailed, but I'm trying to use AI in any way I can. So the coolest thing that I saw, obviously it's on your LinkedIn profile. Maybe we'll get into it. 1991, you worked in the Office of Presidential Speechwriting, unbelievable, that for George Bush, which is pretty cool. And then 2000 is when you and Phil Rosenthal started Fastcase, and you essentially wanted to make legal research more accessible because taxpayer dollars were already paying for it. And then we had a duopoly that was getting us in there. And over the years, you grew and you got lots of great partnerships with bar associations until fast forward 20 years. You started then really accelerating your growth by, I think you had 3 companies join you that either bought or merged with Judica, Casemaker, and maybe there's just those 2.
Docket Alarm, Next Chapter.
Alarm. I knew there was a bunch.
Yeah.
And then in 2023, you merged with vLex. And based on one of the things that I saw you say in an interview, you just knew you need to accelerate growth with what was happening with AI integration, and you knew working with another organization would do that. I want to stop there. I just want to make sure I just covered the basis. Is that a good representation of where you are now? 2 years later, you've created something called Vincent Studio and Vincent AI. And what's, to me, the most interesting part of this is you've actually become more present. Usually you hear about a merger or acquisition, and generally the founders, you don't hear from anymore. They move on or something else. You've been even more vocal and more in the front lines, at least from my standpoint. So I just want to make sure I got that right before we dive into any questions or anything you want to correct there.
Yeah, no, it's exactly right. And I'll just say that the merger we were hoping would accelerate our work in AI. It would accelerate the expansion of our mission from just the US to around the world. I think the vLex team was hoping to really gain a foothold in the US market. They had a great presence around the world, and then just allied content builders and managers and thinkers and product people who could accelerate their work as well. And it's worked out really well. We didn't sell Fastcase. We merged the companies vLex and Fastcase together. We called the company vLex. We could have just as easily called it Fastcase. They were about the same size, about the same scope, about the same revenue. We've been peers and worked together for a super long time. Nobody like sold their shares. Our investors sold their shares. Phil and I, the co-founders, our team held on to that equity, and we're all in this together at vLex. So I'm more engaged than ever.
Got
With
it.
Phil everywhere. We're all in.
Got it. Okay, that clarifies it, and I'm sure you've shared this many times before. So I apologize if I didn't know that, but that's interesting to know, and that makes sense. That essentially there's no exit in any form. Doesn't for you, for the founders, it was more like, okay, let's combine forces and make this bigger. That, by the way, in itself is a big decision to make. But I don't even want to go there yet. The first question I want to ask you, because it may lead to something, maybe nothing. You do a lot of conversations, a lot of podcasts, you're out there. Is there anything that you wish you talked about more, or somebody that you wish people asked you more, as you, and maybe as a gear towards your learning and your growth over the years, that you don't talk about enough?
Gosh, I like talking about Phil Rosenthal, my co-founder, quite a lot. And my like the team that I've had the joy of working with over the years. I feel like a lot of it's focused on my work. And I feel, I don't know, there's a mythology in the startup culture around the founders, right? But like the success of Fastcase and now of vLex and Fastcase is really, it's a story that has like a lot of champions, and they're not predominantly the founders, And so I would love to talk about team building a little bit and how that scales, and to the extent that's interesting to you, to
Yeah, love it.
maybe just talk about some of the other people who have been instrumental in this success story.
I love it. And let's go that route and see where that takes us. But you mentioned Phil. Correct me if I'm wrong. Wasn't he a rocket scientist?
And actual rocket science. Yeah.
And did he
So
teach with
Stephen Hawking,
Stephen
yes.
Hawking's? So
Yeah, he was Stephen Hawking's TA at Caltech. So Phil, before we started Fastcase, before we were working together at Covington and Burling in DC, we were next door neighbors. Phil got a PhD in superstring cosmology at Caltech. Stephen Hawking, I guess, works at Oxford for the summer, but winters at Caltech, or wintered at Caltech, and handpicked Phil to be his TA. It's a really hard program. Like, not everyone who does the PhD in physics at Caltech finishes the program. It's like a 7-year program at best. It often takes 9, 10 years. Phil did it in 4. And it's like the New Horizons mission that just took all of the pictures of Pluto and the Kuiper Belt. Like Phil worked on that at JPL.
wow.
So he was on one of the teams that built like one of the first candidates for a launch vehicle for New Horizons. So the word genius gets thrown around quite a lot, but there's very few definitions of the word genius that don't include my co-founder, Phil. He finished the PhD in 4 years, so he'd go off to Harvard Law School and graduate top of his class.
It's great to just remind, and this goes again, talking about imposter syndrome. It's like when you see really successful people and companies, and I've seen the theme over and over again in just the 45 interviews that I've done so far, is you keep going layers and layers deep. And these are really not only smart individuals, but those who excel in many different areas in their life. And sometimes it's so easy from the outside to be like, man, I should have thought of what Fastcase did. I could have done that too. All I needed to do was organize the information. So I appreciate you just sharing a little bit about his background there. And,
Yeah, and I'll share this too. Maybe two other things, right? I mean, I think you're right. I think we mythologize the founder genius complex in our stories. And Phil certainly is a genius, right? But one very important thing about our founding story was I was frustrated, right? I had this problem with legal research and I was upset about it. But it was Phil who said, let's go do something about it. Many people, even today, I have many problems where I'm like, oh, somebody should figure out a way to manage cap tables or something. But it was the gumption, like Phil really wanted to do this, that allowed us to have a company in the first place. And then the other antidote to this founder genius myth is luck and timing, which are almost totally out of your control, right? So Phil and I started in November of 1999. By the time we had our prototype built and a business plan put together, like the entire .com 1.0 bubble had burst. It was March, April of 2020, or of
Yeah.
2000 rather, that everything went kaflooey. And I think if we had started 4 months earlier, we probably would have raised money and been instructed to spend it very fast and blown the thing up. But instead, we were forced to bootstrap the company over time. And luck plays such an important role in these companies, right? Things that are completely out of our control that just break our way. And there are brilliant founders and very good companies that have the opposite luck, that are just the wrong time or the wrong market, or something bad happens that you just can't control, right? And I think people, I don't know, maybe underappreciate the importance of just luck and timing for the companies that make it.
I don't know if you ever heard of the Jim Collins return on luck theory.
No, no.
You'll appreciate it. Jim was trying to figure out like why some companies seem quote unquote luckier than other companies. And so he did a whole study to see these companies that are really successful, did they have more luck? And what it turns out, they didn't. But what he did find out was the return on luck. When they had bad luck, they were able to better take advantage or get through that more than those people who had good luck. So that's what they determined. Like that's what made a company more successful, was the return on luck or return on bad luck when they were not getting what they wanted in so many times. So I thought that was interesting because there's sometimes you get lucky breaks, but sometimes you don't. And how do you handle that?
It's fascinating. Thank you for sharing that with me.
Yeah. Okay. Let's just lean in a little bit to the team aspect and then we'll see where that goes. But I obviously completely agree with that. We hired a coach in 2016 from scaling up. We built systems and processes similar to EOS, Entrepreneurs Operating System. What were some key moments for you as you built your team or hires or decisions that you learned from?
Can I start by complimenting you as such a good listener?
Sure, thanks.
I said I want to talk about Phil and our team, and you asked me in succession about Phil and the team. It's such a small thing, but you really are actively listening, and I totally
It's just a
appreciate
conversation.
it.
I truly have no interview questions. So
As well as I do. It's very rare for people to actually listen deeply and with intention, and I appreciate that you do it.
I appreciate that. Thank you.
Yeah. So when I think about my team, we gutted it out for a really long time. We were a very small team for a lot of our history. When I say small, 4 or 5 people competing with Westlaw and Lexis. 15 years maybe.
Wow, I didn't realize
Like
that.
in 2013, we moved into, I'll call them aspirational offices in DC. It was a really nice office that we got to develop, an old hardware store that had been destroyed in the 1968 riots in Washington, D.C., and had been boarded up for 40 years. And we restored it with a developer. But we moved into this office in 2013, and we were like 14 people. There was office space for 40 people, and there were 14 of us. And at 14, we were feeling pretty big by our standards. Our first chief technology officer, Andrew Schiebler, was a genius. He had built in his teens.
What's his name?
Andrew Schiebler.
And he was the CTO?
Yep. Our first chief technology officer. He basically built the first functional working version of Fastcase by himself as a single developer with his own hands. He had built the routing system for FedEx when he was a teenager, like a genius, but also a brilliant manager, a good business person, like just a really warm and sincere human being, a good manager of people.
Out of curiosity, how did you get Andrew to decide to work at Fastcase that early on? Was it stock options, a vision, a little bit of both?
A little bit of both. I think more than anything, he appreciated the challenge.
Yeah.
It was like something worth investing his life into, which he did for many years. He was a friend of one of our early investors.
One of the things that stood out to me when Fastcase came on my radar, and again, I don't really know the technology side of it because I I'm not a practicing attorney anymore, so it didn't really use it as much. So I can use it. I'm like, oh, this looks good. I do know how complicated Westlaw and Lexis was, though. One thing that stood out to me was the bar association relationships that you had. Now, was there a team member who was responsible for that? Was that something that you came up with? And was that a pivotal point for Fastcase at the time?
Yeah, I'll point to three things. The first is that business model was created by our current team members when they were at Casemaker. Casemaker invented this kind of bar association model. A lawyer named Joe Shea worked with the Ohio State Bar Association to put just Ohio's law online. And the OSBA paid a fortune so that they can convert all of the judicial opinions into digital format. It was somewhere around 2004 or 5. They had gotten pretty good momentum. They had built a coalition of like 22 states. Every time they added a state, all the states that were already in got to add one more state. And we could see the writing on the wall. This was going to be an all 50 state consortium. And basically, Phil and the current general manager of the US, but then at the time, like a relatively junior member of our team, Christina Steinbrecher Jack, or Nina Jack, as she's known inside the team, built these bar association relationships one by one. Our innovation was, instead of being the 23rd state in the consortium, we will deliver for your members a benefit of all 50 states. And we ran
just to make sure I understand, just Casemaker at that time was a competitor. They were not.
Oh yeah.
And so you were saying what I hear you saying, you just copied their strategy and built your own consortium, or you?
Yeah. No, I think that's right. I think we entered that bar association market, I think, with a better business model.
But literally, it's New York State Bar. Hi, this is Ed Walters from Fastcase.
This is Phil Rosenthal and Nina Jack. They're the ones who get the credit for it.
We'd love to do this. And they were like, nah, we're good. And I'm like, no, please do this. And here's the deal. Okay, we'll try it. Is essentially a sales call each time to get them.
And it took 15 years to build the relationships. This is not like a 8-month sales cycle. Like Phil and Nina and our team, like we traveled the country. We went to, I don't know, 1,000 state bar association meetings over 15 years.
Are you being literal right now?
Yeah, literally like 1,000 meetings and look, the members of these bar associations, the people who run the member benefits programs, like they're close friends of ours. Sincerely, well, like they were
1,000 meetings. Wow.
But they were at Phil's wedding. We hang out with them socially. We built these relationships over more than a decade.
That's fascinating. So 2 questions, just so, and maybe again, to somebody who's in the industry, it's more obvious, and maybe I should know this too, but in those relationships, are the bar associations paying you a very low fee for their members to join, or do the members get a discounted rate when they join, or somewhere in between?
For the most part, the bar association writes one check, and then all of the members get access to the legal research library.
Got it.
And this was transformative, right? Because before that, with the incumbent services, you would buy as much as you could afford, $1,000 a year for a little slice of your state. And then every link ran the risk that you would have a $10,000 bill for going outside your plan or something.
And to give me a sense, can you give a sense of an example of a deal that you did, what it costs for the member or the bar, like what it would have, it was, let's say it was $1,000 per member, $100 per member. If they went with Lexis or Westlaw and they try to do the same thing, it would have been 25 grand. Is it that crazy? Like in that type of?
Oh yeah, for sure. So state bar associations were subscribing in volume. And it makes sense. Not all of their members are going to use legal research all the time. Not all lawyers do, but it was always there. And so they were paying like $10 per member per year, compared to like maybe $5,000 for a comparable plan.
Unlimited access.
Yeah, as many searches as you want, all the printing, free like reference attorney support.
Was that profitable for you guys? I assume it was, or was it?
Yeah, it was great. It was great. And look, if our goal was to make $100 million, it would be a failure. But our goal was to democratize the law. We wanted to make sure more people had meaningful access to the law. And so bar associations were a perfect partner. And ultimately, we improved on the business model of Casemaker, but like really merged with them in 2020. And so suddenly virtually every state bar association in the country had subscription access for all of their members to the legal research database. So 1.3 million subscribers.
That's a really fascinating line that you said. If your goal was to make $100 million, it would have been a failure. Because if you took the TAM, right, the total available market at $10 per user based on all the subscribers, I assume it came out to 30 million or 25 million or something like that.
Right.
And that's why obviously Westlaw and Lexis were so profitable, because they were charging a lot more. Certainly that's a great model until you hit the wall. And you've hit that number where okay, we can't grow any longer. Did that happen to you guys? And if so, was that one of the reasons you potentially sought out money and sought out acquisitions and this current merger?
I would tell the story a little bit differently. So I think the idea was that mere access to judicial opinions and statutes was unattainable and really difficult in 2000. But by 2015, it was like table stakes. It was just barely practicing. And so that's why we started expanding into bankruptcy form filing as document automation and helping people to do their work before courts. We expanded into Docket Alarm, which was at the time like a database of mostly federal filings from cases, their docket sheets and all the documents that were in them. And I think it was something like 50 million documents in the database when we acquired it, but today it's almost 900 million. And so you end up with these really interesting big data applications where instead of starting with a blank sheet of paper, you could find a motion like the one you're trying to file from a similar court to a similar judge, and through a subscription to Docket Alarm, download that as a template, right? And obviously with generative AI, a billion plus corpus of tagged structured legal data has other independent values. But the idea in 2015 was there are all kinds of services that very happy Fastcase users might be interested in purchasing and subscribing to. And so people came for the cases and statutes, but stuck around for quantitative law or analytics and Docket Alarm, or later the full court press imprints. We had a whole line of treatises and things like that people would subscribe to because it helped them. And it didn't hurt that we had 1.3 million subscribers that we were making those available to, and probably, 300,000 unique users every year.
There's so many paths to go from this. I'm thinking about from the things that you just said are three different areas. One, I'm still want to go back to at some point the 1,000 meetings that you went to over a 15-year period, because I think it's a really important lesson in understanding of that, because just even the budgeting of that is a lot, and the time and the away from family, the travel, there's just a lot behind that. And I'm sure at some point there's doubt and things like that. Are we going to too many? Are we doing that? So that's one thing. The second thing I'm curious is how you afforded these acquisitions. Did you need to raise money for that? We talk about people. Did you feel like you knew what you're doing there, or did you have to hire the right people to help you? And don't worry, I have these written down if you forget. And the third one is, you feel like at the point that I felt that many people feel about Clio for years, it's anything you try or touch seems to work and be wow, great idea. And just, now they're adding this, now they're adding that. And it just feels like there's this momentum behind it. But what I'm curious about that, if you feel that way, but I'm sure there's we see above the hood. If you open up the hood, what's happening there? So you can answer those in any order you want. And if you forget one, don't worry, I'll bring it back up to you.
Yeah. Why don't you start with the first one and I'll walk through them.
Okay.
You started with 1,000 meetings.
Yeah, this is for legal tech founders, right? There's more than enough conferences we can go to, and they're expensive now, especially having booths. I don't know if you had booths at these or you're just showing up. And so there's a budget. You have to figure out, who do I go to and where? And it seems like I'm dealing with this today. We started as a B2C company where we've now grown into a very significant B2B company servicing law firms and organizations. But it's not every time there's a decision, okay, who goes, how much do we want to spend? And so I'm curious how you weigh that.
I think the first thing to say was that at the time it was less expensive. Legal tech has become a thing. It wasn't always a thing. Conferences have become a thing. They weren't always like really a thing. And so it was not as expensive in the 2005 era. The other thing to say, though, is that Phil and Nina in particular were indefatigable. They traveled everywhere. They would make 3 stops in a row before coming home sometimes. Absurd things. Driving through the middle of the night to be at a conference somewhere remote by the next day. I certainly did my tour too. I probably made 50 trips a year for a decade.
Wow.
I mean, we always said that we're not going to go broke from a lack of elbow grease. We worked our asses off. And I will say, as much as I did, Nina and Phil did more. And they really like worked to build the relationships with every state bar association in the country. And if you talk to the member benefits people, the executive directors, the elected presidents from any bar association in the country, they will tell you they know Phil, they know Nina, and they know them, and they can tell you, like, here's times that we had coffee together in the morning or went to dinner in New Orleans, or they'll have a million great stories about these awesome experiences they had with Nina and Phil, which is why a couple of years ago, like LexisNexis said, we want to get into the bar market. And people were like, oh my God, what are you going to do with Lexis in the market? I was like, welcome. I invite the competition. If you guys want to invest the time and effort to really invest to be a part of this market, that's good for everybody.
Right. You could show up, but obviously it was Lexis who acquired, who was it? Lexis? Oh my God, I'm so blanking the name. It's for 600 million.
It was Thomson Reuters who acquired Casetext.
Yeah, which is, okay, let's not get digress there. Just out of curiosity, usually there's not, but was there a meeting or a deal or a bar association that sort of helped build the momentum? It's like, okay, we got this bar association, now others are going to fall behind that. Or
Sure. I feel like for a while, every one of those early deals really mattered. I can remember in 2004, Phil and I were basically planning to wind Fastcase down. We had tried for 5 years to make it go. It hadn't really caught on. We weren't able to raise money. We had a hard time doing consumer marketing to small firm lawyers. We didn't have a whole lot of resources to do it. And we basically said, we need to win one of 2 deals that were considering us at the time. One of them was Social Law Library, who was considering a member benefit. It's a membership library for lawyers in Massachusetts, in Boston.
Yeah.
And the other one was the Louisiana State Bar Association. And we needed one or the other of them to pick Fastcase and to subscribe, or we weren't going to make it. And both did. And that was a huge vote of confidence, momentum builder. I was going to pay the salaries of the team for a little while. The Florida bar signed almost immediately after that.
Got it.
And so it was coming in 2005. We were planning to launch in July. And it turns out we launched right before Hurricane Katrina. So 20,000 lawyers in Louisiana and a bunch of lawyers in Florida too, by the way, were out of their offices and their homes. They were in Houston or Oklahoma City or in Memphis or something and trying to finish their practice. They were able to do it in some part because of Fastcase. I'll put in that early group the Oklahoma State Bar Association. Jim Calloway, their member benefits guru, was an early proponent of Fastcase, which made a huge difference for us. I always tease him and tell him he's a co-founder of Fastcase because of his support. He's just retiring this year, so it's bittersweet.
One thing we're not going to dive into because we don't have 8 hours right now is obviously you built a great product. You can't build momentum unless you have a great product. And I think I'll just ask one, maybe a 30-second answer is, what do you think separated it and made it such a, I guess, I don't know if it's easy or something else, but what made it work so well that helped you grow?
Phil and I had a real vision for what we wanted legal research to be. Like in 1999, we filed this awesome patent application, but even the prototype for Fastcase, like invented probably a dozen things that we take for granted in legal research right now. Like when we started in 1999, there was no relevance ranking. Your search results would come back, highest court first, most recent case or the oldest case, next highest court. And so like the thing you were looking for could be 200 results deep in the old way of doing things. We were the first to put relevance ranking or allow you to resort your search results. Didn't exist in legal research. We were the first to put the number of citations to each document in the search results automatically. So you could see in the search results if something was very authoritative or not. The first to do data visualization. We knew all of this on the day we started. And so we had this very clear vision for what legal research could and should be if you were starting from scratch. I'm sure the incumbents had very good ideas about research, but it's just very hard once you have an installed base and people who are addicted to your product to make those kinds of changes. So it was a pretty classic Clay Christensen innovator's dilemma moment because we were able to attack from the small firm and solo market. We were able to be pretty nimble and change the product and innovate pretty quickly. So it was in some ways like the attacker's advantage. And again, in the classic Clay Christensen way, it's not that the incumbents weren't innovative or didn't have great ideas. It's just that when they would workshop them with their existing customers, by self-selection, the existing customers would say, I'm pretty well served with what I have right now.
Exactly. I don't need it. I'm good. I don't need YouTube. Out of curiosity, I assume one of the two incumbents or both over the years try to acquire you guys. And
Sure.
And I assume you're like, nah, it's not the right fit or whatever reasoning being, because it just makes, when I hear all this innovation, it just makes too much sense. I'm going to ask these two other questions about Fastcase and the merger. And then my last few questions will be about you, and we'll make a hard switch from that. The second one was the acquisitions. At some point you raised money. Was it, what's the learning and growth story from that in terms of, again, it's still a risk to do that and go through that and give up equity and do that, talking from somebody who's never given up equity or never raised money. So I'm actually truly interested in learning. And of course, you look at the market today, you go to any of the conferences, Zach Posner's conference obviously is unbelievable. The Legal Tech Fund Summit, everybody's raising money about everything. Yeah, I was just curious.
Yeah. Well, David, actually, we didn't raise money.
You didn't?
No. So we did a seed round, probably smaller than any angel investment today. We did it in 2002, a growth fund called Spencer Trask, and a handful of friends and family who invested relatively small amounts of money, and Phil and me. And then we basically never raised again until the merger 25 years later. And so when we acquired businesses, two things were a factor in that. One, for many years, we saved money. We were not a big company. We didn't hire a lot of people. People are super expensive. And so we saved money. And we were, frankly, pretty cheap. Sometimes Motel 6 was too good for us. We would stay at the Motel 4.5. And we were very driven about that. Our chief operating officer at the time, a woman named Jennifer Owens, was very disciplined about cash. So when we wanted to start doing the acquisitions, we had money in the bank. The second thing was we really had alignment with the founders whose companies we acquired and later merged with. So that makes a big difference too. It's not just about the money, it's about the values. It's about believing in the same ideas and the same outcomes. And so when we worked with Janine Sickmeyer to acquire Next Chapter and with Michael Sander to acquire Docket Alarm, they really believed in the mission and they had a stake in the upside. And so our willingness and enthusiasm to share the upside with them made a big difference. And then later, I think this was maybe an unexpected consequence, but I don't think we realized banks would view earnouts as something like debt. even though it's contingent, even though like these kinds of earn out checks are like my favorite check to write because you pay them when you're successful. It was later viewed as like a negative by finance people. So I suppose it came with its own cost. But I will say that we had a lot of freedom because we didn't raise the money. And you
So,
had
so
asked
me,
about, I'm sorry, go ahead.
no, finish your sentence. Sorry.
You had asked about what it looks like under the hood. Like it just looks like success from the outside. I'll tell you, I think we were very selective about M&A, and I think we really made a lot of very good bets. But it was around the 2018 period that we said we need to make better mistakes. Like we're being too careful. And I'm talking about the team. Steve Eric, our chief operating officer for many years, was designed to be like our Eric Schmidt or our Sheryl Sandberg, the person who really helps us to manage at scale as we get to be a bigger company. So Phil and I were responsible for the vision. Steve really helped us to scale, to manage larger and more complex teams. Couldn't have been successful without him. But we certainly like made some mistakes. And that was part of the deal. You can't win at roulette if you're always placing one bet. We
Just
were trying
any
to place like better bets.
any mistake come to mind right now that really stood out?
No. I
That,
mean,
that, that,
we
that-
we kept trying to like to make good bets, right? To
yeah.
to do things
Yeah.
well. And I think for the most part, they really worked out. The closest thing you could say was Full Court Press, our publishing imprint for print books. And we felt like there were a lot of print books that were being cast aside. We wanted to have secondary materials, and we offered them both online and in print. And we thought that print was really important, book nerd as well. And I think what we found is that there's just not an appetite for print. Like people, I always imagine lawyers who want to pull the book off the shelf, have it behind them. And I think we just found for the most part, they would rather have it searchable and inside their Fastcase or vLex subscription than to have it in print. So we've migrated that imprint to digital only or like digital first and maybe a couple of print publications
Well,
in there.
obviously, from my side of point of view, that makes a ton of sense. Obviously,
Right.
um, I guess last question about Fastcase, or two last questions, is one is what is Phil doing now? What's his role? In
Yeah. So Phil is the chief growth officer and his job, it's curling. He's like sweeping ahead for the next market. I think one of the interesting things about large language models and Vincent AI is this is not a market we anticipated 5 years ago. And so when we're building this giant set of data, there's all kinds of interesting opportunities for it. Is it going to be litigation finance? Is it going to be insurance companies? Is it going to be high frequency traders? Like we don't really even know what the next
yeah,
applications are going to be. So Phil is building 2 years ahead of us
wow.
markets in the way that he did with state bar associations and other markets inside of Fastcase.
You mentioned earlier on with your model that charging $10 per user would not get you to 100 million in revenue. I assume now, where are your sights on now in terms of growth in that number? Because certainly that seems very realistic or on path, or like how big are you guys envisioning now?
Yeah, I think that's the thing. Like, if bar association member benefits were the only thing we did, you hit like kind of a revenue ceiling, but that's fine. I love it if people just come and subscribe to vLex and Fastcase through the bar association and only use the free benefit. But there's so many useful things around it now that people can subscribe to and are subscribing to like crazy. Don't hold me to this, but I think I just heard that we made more money in March than we did in the first 10 years of Fastcase's history. New money, right? Like new subscribers to the services than we did in the first 10 years of Fastcase. So there's like a whole bunch of very useful things like Vincent AI, these kind of workflow tools, the subscription books that we're doing through Full Court Press, the analytics and tracking through Docket Alarm that are super useful. And So the mission hasn't changed, right? The mission was always democratize the law, make the practice of law less stupid. And if you look at every decision we make, it touches one or both of those things. And it's just we're at a larger scale now. And there are many useful things beyond the bar association benefits that people are subscribed to. Maybe the last thing to say about this is that we made our bones in the small law market.
Yeah.
After the merger with vLex, we also have the law of 110 countries in a single platform. And the Vincent AI tool covers 17 countries now. For most of those countries, it's the first and only time that country's law is available on AI. And so, in addition to a fanatical, very happy fan base among small firm and solo practitioners, there's a new cohort of the biggest law firms and corporate legal departments in the world whose problems aren't territorial, they're global.
Yeah.
Who are really excited about a global vLex platform and having AI solutions where they can scan the horizon, where they can see things coming in ways they couldn't before. They don't want to log into incumbent platform in the UK, incumbent platform in the EU, incumbent platform in Canada, incumbent platform in the US. They do one search in vLex and get them all at once. And now we're very popular in small law firms and very popular in the biggest law firms and biggest corporations in the world. The two are converging on each other in a way that, again, we couldn't have really planned for, but the merger has created this interesting business opportunity for us.
Very exciting. Just watching from the sidelines. Do you guys, and I don't know if you do, have you shared any sort of ballpark in terms of how big you are as a company now? I don't know if you're public about any form of that, if you give interviews about that.
Yeah, we don't. We're a private company. I think I've got this right when I say 17 time zones in the company right now.
How many employees now?
350.
So a big change from the 4 people in
yeah, or 14 people.
14. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, it wasn't that long ago.
All right. So if we got 5 minutes left because I've taken enough of your precious time, I'm going to do some rapid fire questions. Each one could be its own 60-minute interview. There's a lot of learning you need to do to keep up with all of this. What are some books that have been transformative to you? And if you have a Kindle nearby or Audible, or feel free to look at it. But and it can be self-improvement wise, or it could be like diving deep into understanding AI better or anything like that.
Sure. I'm a huge proponent of Ethan Mollick's Co-Intelligence right now. Such a good book and accessible, but very smart. I've been reading his Substack as well. I'm teaching, which is an amazing way to learn. And so I've been designing this curriculum. As you can imagine, it changes very fast. And I'm constantly reading like kind of academic papers and articles and keeping up with the state of the art.
You're teaching 2 courses, the one about the law of robots and generative AI in practice. Is that?
Yeah. At Georgetown in the fall, the law of robots. And then this past semester, generative AI in big law. So 2 classes at Georgetown.
Did you pursue those opportunities or did they reach out to you?
A little bit of both.
Okay.
I started teaching at Georgetown in 2014. I teach 2 hours a week on a Wednesday afternoon.
Teaching is the best form of learning for sure. Obviously, it's our business model. We work with 1,500 faculty members who, for one of the reasons they come to us is the ability to clarify their messaging, to be put out there as a teacher, but the value that they get from just preparing to teach the course and communicate effectively is so energizing. And that's who I am. I'm a lifelong learner, and I'm totally, but back to you because we have 3 minutes.
Oh, I would just say Cornell Law School, Cornell Tech for most of the last 6 years, but starting this winter, at University of Chicago, where I'm teaching generative AI in legal practice. And then from a learning perspective, I would just say I'm a GTD guy, getting things done. GTD, getting things done, change my life, change my work. I know it's old now, but that is like I'm an inbox zero guy. Like I'm very disciplined about my calendar and about, what I'm doing. I don't know if you remember from, I think it's 7 Habits, the Eisenhower decision-making matrix, things that are urgent and important, important and not urgent, urgent, not important, not urgent, not important. I'm living in the fight between quadrants 2 and 3 right now. And I've carved out for myself at vLex the important, not urgent quadrant two.
And I'll just say that is a really big challenge for all of us. It's very easy to stay busy all day, but are you working on the most important things and not the urgent things? And sometimes just not the easy things. And it's something I'm constantly figuring out as I try to think about how to scale and grow Lawline beyond where we are. We're doing some really interesting things, but certainly
It seems like you've done a great job at it.
yeah. And look, we have, to your point, it's the team. It's always the team. When you're not the smartest in the room, it's the best thing. When you, it's as somebody who likes to control, it's also hard to do that. But we just launched and it's coming out a new product that's going to essentially be a CLE studio. It's funny because you have Vincent Studio.
Yeah.
It's going to allow any firm, organization to, it's an accreditation platform as well as a hosting platform, because a lot of our clients were asking for it. And that's the best way to build something. And so we figured, let's make it easier for them to do it on their own. And it's one
Amazing.
thing, but I'd certainly love to get beyond the CLE landscape because of my passion for lifelong learning. And that's why we built the AI learning tool, the learning assistant, where you can get just-in-time learning. But it is a challenge to get from building something to get momentum when there's a behavior that's set in with your core customer. Pivoting to the amount of products that you have is not easy. It's not something that most companies are able to do successfully. In fact, it's just the opposite. Huge kudos to you and what you've done. I think that is a good ending point because an hour of your time and your urgent, your 2 to 3 areas, it's important not only to get you back, but also let's do this again at another point. And so now next time I see you in person, I'll know that I won't be insecure.
Oh my gosh, no, we're definitely having coffee or a beer next time I see you.
Perfect. All right. Thank you so much, Ad. I really appreciate your time.
Thanks, David. Thanks for having me.
Awesome.